Have you ever felt like you're holding on to something so tightly, afraid to let go because you don't know what will happen if you do? Maybe it's a dream, a relationship, or even control over your future. We all have areas of our lives where surrendering to God feels incredibly difficult. But what if I told you that true freedom and peace come from surrender? What if the very thing you're holding on to is keeping you from experiencing the fullness of what God has planned for you? Proverbs 3:5 through 6 is probably one of the most well-known Bible verses on trust, and for good reason. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." This verse offers a powerful invitation to surrender, specifically to surrender our own understanding of how things should be. I think we often get stuck on the idea that we need to understand everything. We want to have a clear roadmap to see 10 steps ahead. But the truth is, God doesn't always give us the full picture, and that's where trust comes in. Surrender isn't about giving up, it's about giving over. It's about releasing control to the one who sees the whole picture, the beginning and the end, and trusting that his plan is better than anything we could imagine. It's important to remember that surrendering to God's plan doesn't mean we won't face difficulties. In fact, sometimes trusting God leads us into seasons of uncertainty. Look at the story of Abraham in Genesis 12. God called Abraham to leave everything, his country, his people, and his father's household, to go to a land that God would show him. Think about that for a moment. God didn't give Abraham a GPS or a detailed itinerary. He simply said, "Go," and Abraham went. That's radical trust. That's surrender. And what did God do? He made Abraham the father of many nations, just as he had promised. Abraham wasn't perfect. He had moments of doubt, just like we do. But his willingness to surrender opened the door for God to work powerfully in his life. The same is true for us. When we let go of our need to control and surrender to God's plan, we make room for him to work in ways that we could never orchestrate on our own. Let's also look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In Luke 22:42, Jesus prays, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Jesus, who knows the agony that awaits him on the cross, still chooses surrender. He demonstrates the ultimate act of trust in the Father's plan, even though it leads him to suffering. And because of that surrender, we are offered the gift of salvation. Now, I'm not saying that surrender is easy. It's not. It requires a daily, sometimes moment-by-moment, decision to trust God over ourselves. It requires humility, because surrender forces us to admit that we don't have all the answers. But here's the beautiful thing. When we surrender, we invite God to work in ways that go beyond our understanding. Romans 8:28 tells us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Notice it doesn't say that all things are good, but that God works for the good. That means he's taking every situation, whether good, bad, or somewhere in between, and using it for our growth, for his glory, and for the good of his kingdom. But we can only experience that when we surrender and trust him with the outcome. Often we hold on to things out of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, or fear of disappointment. But when we surrender, we're making a bold declaration.